Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we really try to cut through the noise and get to the facts behind the biggest trends in enterprise tech.
And today, we're tackling something absolutely critical. If you're sitting in finance or healthcare, government maybe, basically any highly regulated industry,
Right.
and you're looking at AI solutions, or maybe you're getting bombarded with pitches right now, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Yeah, because the sales pitches are, well, they're everywhere, aren't they? Super aggressive.
Oh, completely. Every consultant, every startup, they're all promising the same things. Secure deployment, custom builds, seamless integration, guaranteed ROI. You know the language.
They make it sound so easy, so sold.
Exactly. So our mission today is to slice through that. We've pulled together a ton of industry research, market reports, internal frameworks that companies use for due diligence.
I'm thinking dozens of these AI vendors.
Dozens, yeah.
Ah.
Specifically focusing on how they perform or don't in these high-stakes regulated environments where, failure isn't just an option, it's potentially catastrophic.
Okay, so separating the marketing hype from the actual verifiable substance.
Precisely.
And I think we need to get straight to the punchline here. The big takeaway that, honestly, should frame every single thought you have about AI adoption this year.
Which is this?
It's pretty brutal. The vast majority, the overwhelming majority of AI vendors out there, they just can't show sustained, real-world success. Their projects carry, frankly, an unacceptable level of risk.
And we're not just talking theory here. This is an opinion. We have the data.
Yeah, let's hit them with the core statistic.
Yeah.
The number that everyone listening, especially if you're a tech leader, needs to burn into their brain right now.
Okay, here it is. The failure rate for AI projects, specifically those trying to move beyond a nice demo, beyond a pilot, into actual scaled production in regulated industries, is somewhere between an astonishing 80 and 95%.
80 to 95%. Let that sink in.
Well,
It's almost unbelievable.
It is. And these aren't small problems like, oh, we went over budget or missed a deadline.
No, these are complete collapses.
Yeah.
Systemic failures where the project just stops. It never makes it out of the pilot phase.
Which really demands, as you said, skepticism. Not cynicism, right? We're not saying AI itself is bad.
Not at all.
But when you're dealing with HIPAA or the SEC or FINE-RA, the consequences of getting it wrong are just enormous. Failure is not an option. And yet, the data shows it's the norm. It's what usually happens.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We have to start by just accepting this number, as shocking as it is. So
Yeah.
why? Why are almost all these projects falling apart? Why is this failure rate like double what we see even for really complex traditional IT projects?
Right. Let's ground this failure rate first. It's not just one analyst saying this. There was a big study, 2025 from MIT, focused specifically on corporate generative AI.
Okay.
They found that a staggering 95% of those corporate gen AI pilots, they fail. They fail to deliver any measurable ROI, any real impact on the profit and loss statement.
95% of pilots. And that's the key word, isn't it? Pilot?
Exactly. Anyone can make a pilot look good.
Sure, a small startup, a huge consultancy, they can all cook up a great proof of concept, show you this shiny demo running on perfect, clean data.
In a sandbox, yeah. Completely isolated.
But the paradox, the failed pilot paradox, is that almost nobody can show you that same system running successfully day in, day out in a real, messy, scaled production environment 18 months later.
Right. And what's maybe even more worrying is how quickly the market seems to be correcting or maybe panicking.
How so?
Well, companies are shifting from just throwing money at pilots to actively cutting their losses.
Ah, okay.
We saw the percentage of companies just abandoning the majority of their AI initiatives. It basically tripled. It jumped from 17% in 2024 to 42% in 2025.
Wow, that's a huge leap. So leadership is finally waking up and saying, these endless pilots are just burning cash.
Seems like it. They're realizing their resource strains and pulling the plug.
So this huge failure rate, it's not random bad luck. There are predictable reasons, systemic causes, specific to AI.
Absolutely. And if you, the listener, want to actually vet a vendor properly, you have to understand exactly where these projects tend to die. It's crucial.
Okay, let's dig into those root causes. Where should we start? What's the number one killer?
Oh, hands down, the undisputed champion of AI failure, the absolute foundation for most disasters. It's poor data quality and governance.
Right. Garbage in, garbage out, basically, but on an industrial scale.
Exactly. And the stats here are they're horrifyingly consistent across different research groups. Between 80 and 87% of AI projects fail specifically because of data quality issues. Full stop.
80 to 87%, just from the data.
Just from the data. Things like, inconsistent labels, missing information, formats that don't match up, or just not enough good quality data to train the model in the first place.
And this data toxicity, as some call it, it has a massive financial cost even before the AI project fails, right?
Oh, absolutely massive. There are estimates that poor data quality costs the U.S. economy something like $3.1 trillion a year.
$3.1 trillion?
Yeah.
That's hard to even picture. What does that cost actually represent?
It's the cost of constantly having to clean data, fix errors, try to reconcile information from different silos, all that remediation work. It means your very expensive data scientists aren't building models. They're basically glorified spreadsheet janitors.
Yeah, cleaning up messes instead of creating value.
And then you layer on the regulated industry angle. Here, bad data isn't just a financial problem, it becomes a massive legal liability.
How so?
Well, if your data is biased or incomplete, the AI model you build on it won't just give bad results. It'll actually amplify the biases that were already in the data.
Okay, so it makes existing unfairness even worse.
Precisely. And that immediately puts you in legal jeopardy. You could face EEOC scrutiny if it's a hiring tool showing bias, SEC penalties if it's a flawed financial model, or huge HIPAA violations if patient data is wrong or not properly anonymized.
So the client, the company buying the AI, ends up holding the bag for the model's biased or incorrect output.
Yeah, absolutely. That model built on bad data. It's not a solution. It's a ticking compliance time bomb, a multi-million-dollar lawsuit waiting to happen.
Okay, so data is disaster number one. But let's say, hypothetically, you managed to get your data pristine, you've governed it perfectly, the project still needs to run somewhere, right? And that brings us to integration.
Integration, yep. That's the technical cliff where many of the remaining AI projects, the ones that somehow survive the data problems, go to die.
Is there a number for that too?
There is. Pretty consistently, research shows about 50% of all AI projects fail specifically due to integration issues. Half.
Half. Okay, why is integration such a graveyard?
It boils down to a fundamental conflict, really. Modern AI tools, they're built for the cloud. They expect real-time data streams, modern APIs, massive amounts of computing power that can scale up and down instantly.
Right. Very flexible, very current tech.
But where does the really critical data live in most large organizations? Your patient records, your transaction history, your core inventory.
It's locked up in legacy systems, right? ERP, CRMs, maybe custom-built mainframes from decades ago.
Exactly. Systems that often predate modern cloud thinking entirely. They live in their own isolated silos, built on infrastructure that's sometimes 20, 30 years old.
So the vendor comes in and says, oh, we'll integrate seamlessly.
That's the promise. But seamless integration, in reality, usually means the vendor has to write incredibly complex custom software bridges.
This is the glue code you mentioned.
That's the term we often use, yeah. Glue code. It's expensive, custom software written just to connect the shiny new AI tool to the clunky old legacy system.
And I'm guessing that glue code isn't exactly robust.
It's inherently brittle, often poorly documented. And what happens when the legacy system gets an update? Or the AI platform changes?
The glue breaks.
The glue breaks and the whole AI process grinds to a halt. It becomes this huge, hidden maintenance burden that nobody factored into the original ROI calculation. The vendor built it, maybe, but now you, the client, are stuck supporting it.
Okay, so data quality, integration, nightmares. What's the third major failure point?
It's the overarching risk that looms over everything, even if the tech somehow works perfectly. The compliance and security gap.
Ah, the regulatory minefield.
Exactly. In these high-stakes sectors, regulators don't see AI failures as, honest mistakes. They see it as negligence.
Yeah, you've got FINRA, the SEC, FDA, GDPR, APA.
Yeah.
The list goes on. And the penalties are real.
Extremely real. HIPAA fines alone can hit $1.5 million per violation. Not per incident, per violation.
Ouch. So you'd think companies would be hyper-focused on AI security, right?
You would think.
Yeah.
The data shows this shocking disconnect. One study found that while 69% of organizations say AI-powered data leaks are a top security worry.
Okay, so they know it's a risk.
They know it's a risk, but almost half of them, 47%, admit they have no AI-specific security controls in place. None. They're not monitoring the models, the data flows, the connections to external systems specifically for AI risks.
Wow. That's like knowing there are burglars casing the neighborhood but deciding not to lock your doors.
It's a massive gap, an open invitation for disaster. And the regulators, they're closing in. FinaRes 2025 report explicitly called out AI and machine learning, especially managing third-party vendors using these techs, as a high-risk area needing much better governance and cybersecurity.
So the failure is systemic here, too. Companies are adopting AI faster than their own security and compliance teams can possibly keep up.
That's exactly it. The tech adoption is outpacing the necessary controls.
Okay, this brings us to a really crucial question, I think. If the failure rate is, let's say, 95% and the risks are this huge, why are we still seeing so many AI startups, so many consultancies popping up constantly, all claiming they can solve these problems?
Yeah, that's the vendor paradox, isn't it? And the answer often is surprisingly simple, maybe even a little cynical.
Which is?
The technology they're pitching, it's usually not unique, it's not proprietary magic. For the most part, it's largely commoditized.
The illusion of proprietary tech. That's the first thing you, as a buyer, need to see through in those meetings.
Absolutely. Break through that marketing veneer. Hashtag tag 2.1, the illusion of proprietary technology.
So when a startup comes in talking about their groundbreaking AI platform, what are they usually selling, really?
More often than not, they're selling a services model wrapped around standard tools. Their value isn't some secret algorithmic sauce they invented.
It's the people. Smart engineers who know how to customize existing stuff.
Exactly. It's technical talent, hopefully smart people, who are good at taking off-the-shelf components and trying to make them work for your specific problem. It's services, not fundamental new tech.
So if you actually look under the hood, what's the tech stack that pretty much everyone is using?
It's remarkably consistent. For building and training models, everybody's using the big open source frameworks. PyTorch, TensorFlow, scikit-learn. These are standard tools.
Then where are they running these models?
On the big cloud platforms, usually leveraging the managed AI services. Think AWS SageMaker, Azure Machine Learning, Google's Vertex AI. Again, standard infrastructure available to anyone.
And for putting it all together, the integration, the pipelines.
They're using common tools there, too. Things like LangChain or Lamy Index for dealing with language models, Kubernetes for managing deployments. It's all pretty standard fare.
So just having access to this tech stack,
Yeah.
That's baseline. That's table stakes. It doesn't make you special.
Not at all. Everyone has access. The real differentiator, the thing that truly matters, is proven, repeatable execution under the pressure of intense regulatory scrutiny.
Right. Can you actually take this common toolbox and make it work reliably, securely, auditably under HIPAA rules or SEC oversight for 2 years straight without blowing up?
That's the multi-million-dollar question. And it's a question that, based on the failure rates, 95% of these vendors simply cannot answer with a yes backed by proof.
Okay. And this widespread use of common technology, this commoditization, it leads us straight into another weird aspect of this market, doesn't it? Hashtag TechTag 2.2, the market paradox and incumbent power.
It does. The market paradox.
Because on one hand, you hear about the explosive growth. The AI consulting market is projected to hit something crazy like $58 billion by 2034.
58.19 billion, yeah. Astronomical growth. And that huge number, that explosion, creates a ton of noise. A flood of startups, flush with VC money, all making big, optimistic claims.
If you actually follow the money, where are the real dollars flowing? Is it going to these startups?
Not proportionally, no. When you look closely, you see this massive concentration of revenue with the established giant enterprise players, the incumbents.
The big guys. Why them?
Because they have the scale, the financial stability to weather failures, and crucially, they already have deep existing relationships with the big enterprise clients in regulated sectors. They're already inside the tent.
Then the scale difference is just immense, right?
It's staggering. Take Accenture. They've already booked $3.6 billion just in generative AI consulting work.
3.6 billion.
They've committed to investing another $3 billion in their AI practice, and they have something like 69,000 people globally working on AI.
69,000 specialists. Wow.
Or look at BCG, Boston Consulting Group, big on strategy. They pulled in $2.7 billion just from AI-related advisory in 2024.
2.7 billion.
Okay.
Oh, and IBM.
Leaning hard on their Watson X platform and their long enterprise history, they've secured a $6 billion AI book of business just since 2023.
6 billion. Okay, so the big players are cleaning up. But this leads to the paradox you mentioned. The market is booming, billions are flowing.
Despite the 95% failure rate for actually getting these things into scaled production.
Right. How does that work? If the projects are failing, how are these firms booking billions? Are they somehow immune? Do their projects succeed?
Not necessarily. They face the exact same data quality nightmares, the same legacy integration headaches as everyone else. The growth isn't primarily frizzled by delivering successful, production-ready AI systems day after day.
So what is fueling it?
It's fueled by selling strategy, selling advisory services, selling due diligence assessments. And, most significantly, it's fueled by selling a constant stream of expensive pilot projects and proofs of concept.
Ah, the pilots that then get abandoned.
Exactly. The client pays a fortune for the pilot, it inevitably hits the scaling wall or the integration nightmare and gets shelved. But the consulting firm already booked the revenue for the pilot phase.
So they're essentially selling the promise, selling the analysis, the workshops, the expensive learning curve.
All billed directly to the client, yeah. They're monetizing the journey towards failure, rather than guaranteeing arrival at a successful destination. It's an industry in some ways built on selling hope and billing for experiments.
That's a pretty sobering perspective on a multi-billion-dollar market.
It really is. And what it means practically is that your whole approach to due diligence has to change fundamentally. You can't just evaluate the claims a vendor makes anymore.
Because the claims are largely commoditized or aspirational.
Exactly. You have to shift to demanding objective, auditable, sustained proof, real evidence. If a vendor cannot provide the specific kinds of proof we're about to talk about, you have to assume their risk profile is simply too high for a regulated environment. Full stop.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. This is the practical playbook. We're going to go through the 6 most common marketing claims you'll hear from AI vendors, especially in finance and healthcare.
Right.
And we'll tell you exactly what kind of verifiable, objective proof you need to demand before you even think about signing a contract.
Okay, claim number 1. You hear this constantly. We offer secure and private AI deployment. They'll talk about enterprise-grade security, data residency, keeping your data in-house, meeting all the compliance rules.
Sounds great. What's the reality check?
The reality is, as we said, basic security is a mandatory requirement, not a feature you pay extra for. It's not a differentiator. The underlying cloud platforms they use, like Azure Private AI or AWS GovCloud, already provide strong baseline security.
So the platform itself is probably secure. Where does it go wrong?
It goes wrong in the vendor's configuration. They might set it up incorrectly, leave gaps, or more commonly, the integration points with your insecure legacy systems create the vulnerability. It's usually a failure in their services, how they configured it, not a flaw in the core tech they're using. They aren't selling you a magic security box, they're selling configuration services.
Okay, so if they claim security, what proof should you demand? What's non-negotiable?
You need objective third-party validation of their actual operational security. Specifically, demand to see their SOC2 Type 2 certification reports.
SOC2 Type 2. Why Type 2 specifically?
Because Type I just says, our controls look good on paper. Type 2 proves that those security controls have actually been operating effectively and consistently over a period of time, usually 6 to 12 months. That's what matters in a regulated world. Sustained operational proof.
Okay, SOC2 Type 2. What else?
You need independent penetration testing results from a reputable external red team that's trying to break into their system. And critically, you need client references, real companies you can talk to who have had active deployments running securely in a similar regulated environment for at least 18 months.
18 months. That proves it wasn't just a quick pilot. It's sustained operation.
Exactly. Less than that, it might just be another failed pilot waiting to happen.
All right, claim number 2. We provide a custom and configurable architecture. They say they'll tailor the AI specifically to your unique business needs, your data, avoiding those generic, one-size-fits-all solutions.
Yeah, custom always sounds appealing, doesn't it? Bespoke, tailored.
But what's the hidden downside?
The reality is custom often translates to over-engineered and brittle. Remember that MIT stat. 95% of customized pilots never make it to production.
Why? Why does customization lead to failure so often?
Because that high degree of specialization makes the system incredibly rigid. If your underlying data patterns shift, or the market changes, or a new regulation comes out, that hyper-customized solution often just breaks. It can't adapt.
Can you give an example?
Sure. In finance, you see this a lot with custom-built machine learning models for fraud detection. They get trained on historical data, look great in the pilot, but then the fraudsters change their tactics. The custom model can't keep up. It starts missing things or flagging legitimate transactions, and it quickly becomes expensive shelfware.
Shelfware software you bought or built but never actually used because it doesn't work in practice.
Exactly. Too brittle to survive contact with reality.
Okay, so if a vendor pitches custom, what proof do you need that their custom work isn't just shelfware waiting to happen? How do you prove it can scale and adapt?
You need to see it handle chaos and volume. Demand live demonstrations where they scale the system under realistic data load, simulating your kind of data, your volume, within your kind of compliance constraints. No generic demos.
Real-world conditions.
Real-world conditions. Ask for detailed architecture diagrams from actual completed production projects, ones that have been running for a while, complete with real performance data latency numbers, throughput metrics under load.
Not just diagrams, but proof it performed.
Proof it performed. And maybe most important, demand the total cost of ownership projections, including detailed 3-year maintenance estimates, that custom, brittle system. You need to know exactly how much it's going to cost you to keep patching and updating it long after their initial team leaves. That's often where the hidden costs explode. All right, claim number 3. This one's huge. We offer strategic and tool-agnostic integration. They promise they can connect their fancy AI tools seamlessly into whatever you've already got, your old ERP, your ancient CRM, doesn't matter the platform or age.
The seamless integration promise again. We already know this is where half the projects die.
Exactly. This claim is responsible for 50% of all AI project failures. And that phrase, tool agnostic, that's often code for the classic expensive consulting playbook. Which is where they bill you an absolute fortune to write that custom glue code we talked about earlier.
Right, the painful, probably undocumented software needed to bridge their modern cloud stuff to your creaking legacy systems.
Precisely. It's complex, it fails frequently, the resulting code is almost always fragile and hard to maintain, and they charge you heavily for every hour spent trying to make it work.
Can we elaborate a bit more on why that glue code is so risky? Give a concrete example.
Sure. Imagine your AI needs real-time customer data, but that data lives in an old, siloed SQL database from 15 years ago that doesn't have modern APIs. The vendor has to build a custom connector, the glue code, that queries that old database, somehow extracts the right data, transforms it into a format the AI understands, and loads it into the AI pipeline, probably bypassing any standard tested pathways.
Okay, sounds shaky already.
It is. Now, that custom connector becomes a single point of failure. If someone changes a table structure in the old database, even slightly, without telling the AI team,
the connector breaks and the whole AI application crashes.
Exactly. And you, the client, are left with a broken process and a massive piece of hidden technical debt that you now have to pay someone, probably the same vendor, even more money to fix and maintain forever.
Okay, so this integration claim is super high risk. What kind of proof or guarantee should you demand here? How do you de-risk this?
You have to demand low-risk engagement terms and basically force them to put skin in the game. First, insist on a proof-of-concept integration using your specific actual technology stack before you sign any big contract.
No generic sandboxes. Make them connect to your messy reality up front.
Absolutely. If they hesitate or refuse to do the pilot integration with your real systems, your actual EHR, your actual ERP, that's a massive red flag. It probably means they know the integration is going to be a nightmare or might even be impossible.
Okay, POC on real systems. What else?
Demand clear integration timelines and cost estimates, but don't just take their word for it. Get accuracy guarantees with financial penalty clauses baked into the contract if they miss deadlines or the integration doesn't perform as promised.
Penalties for delays.
Yeah.
That focuses the mind.
It does. And finally, you need detailed, documented rollback procedures. What happens if the integration attempt fails catastrophically, or worse, corrupts data in your core legacy systems? You need a clear, tested plan to undo the changes and get back to a stable state immediately.
Okay, moving on. Claim number 4. We provide end-to-end managed services. They offer to handle the whole lifecycle strategy, building it, running it, optimizing the models, ongoing maintenance, the works.
The full package deal? Sounds convenient, right? One throat to choke, theoretically.
Yeah, sounds less work for my internal team. But what's the catch?
The catch is that this promise often masks a pure services model designed to create deep vendor lock-in. And especially with smaller or newer firms, they often lack the crucial bench strength.
Bench strength.
Meaning a deep, stable pool of specialized experts. You need people who understand the AI models, the specific cloud platform, your legacy systems, and your industry's regulations. Smaller firms might have a couple of stars, but what happens when they leave?
High staff turnover, which is common in smaller tech firms.
Exactly. High turnover leads to significant knowledge drain. The people who built your custom solution walk out the door, and you end up paying the vendor endlessly for new consultants to come in and try to figure out the complex, possibly undocumented system their predecessors built.
So end-to-end can quickly become endless billing for relearning and patching.
Without tight controls and metrics, absolutely.
So how do you protect yourself if you do need managed services? What proof or contractual safeguards are essential?
Contractual security is everything here. First, demand incredibly robust service-level agreements, SLAs. These need clear metrics for uptime, model performance, response times, and they must include significant financial penalties if the vendor fails to meet those agreed-upon levels.
Real teeth in the SLA, not just vague promises.
Real financial teeth. Second, ask for client references who have been using their managed services for multi-year engagements, not just a one-year pilot that ended. You need proof they can sustain a partnership long-term.
Longevity matters.
Immensely. And finally, demand transparent pricing models. You need to see exactly how costs are calculated, and you need built-in cost control mechanisms and caps. This prevents the vendor from slowly ratcheting up fees to maintain the technical debt they likely created during the initial build. You need predictable costs. Okay, claim 5, the human-in-the-loop or HITL approach. Vendors will emphasize this, saying they maintain human oversight for critical steps, checking for bias, making final decisions, ensuring regulatory compliance.
Right. This sounds ethically responsible and probably legally necessary in many cases. What's the potential problem here?
The problem is that HITL, while essential on paper, is often implemented as pure compliance theater. It looks good in the sales pitch and satisfies a checkbox, but it frequently fails spectacularly when you try to scale it to real production volumes.
Fails how? What breaks?
2 things usually break. First, in time-sensitive processes, the human review step can introduce unacceptable latency. Think high-frequency trading or real-time fraud alerts. A human checking every alert might be too slow.
Okay, speed is one issue. What's the other?
The other, and usually the bigger killer, is the unit economics. The cost structure completely collapses at scale. The cost per decision becomes astronomically higher than the pilot suggested.
How does that happen? Can you walk through an example?
Sure, let's use that fraud detection example again. Say the AI model is pretty good, maybe 95% accurate. That means 5% of transactions are flagged for a human to review.
Okay.
In the pilot phase, maybe you're processing 100 transactions a day. 5% of that is only 5 reviews. One person can easily handle that. Looks great, cost effective.
Right, it seems manageable.
But now you scale up to production volume, maybe 10,000 transactions a day. Still 95% accurate, but now 5% is 500 reviews every single day.
500, okay, that's a lot more work.
It's a massive amount of complex review work. To handle 500 reviews daily, you suddenly need a large, dedicated team of skilled and expensive analysts. The moment you have to hire, train, and manage, say, 50 or 100 human reviewers just to keep up with the AI's exceptions.
The whole ROI argument for automating the process evaporates. The human oversight costs more than the automation saves.
Precisely. The cost structure becomes 10 to 100 times more expensive per decision than the pilot indicated. And the project dies because it's economically unsustainable after the pilot funding runs out. Compliance theater achieved, but operational failure guaranteed.
Wow. So if a vendor talks about HITL, you have to challenge the economics at scale. What proof do you need?
You need proof of economic viability at your expected production volume. Demand a detailed scalability analysis. This should clearly show the projected costs moving from the pilot volume, for example, 100 decisions day, all the way up to your full production volume, for example, 10,000 plus decisions day. It must explicitly calculate the increase in human labor hours and costs required at each stage.
Make them show the math on the human costs increase.
Exactly. And if applicable, you also need latency impact studies. If it's a time-sensitive application, they need to prove with data that adding the human review step won't violate your internal service level needs or any regulatory time limits for things like trade execution or claims processing decisions. Okay, last one, claim number 6. We focus on AI hygiene and governance. They'll talk about data integrity, model transparency, mitigating bias, proactively monitoring for compliance, all the good governance buzzwords.
Sounds very responsible, very reassuring, especially in regulated industries. What's the reality check here?
The reality, especially for newer or smaller firms, is that this is often purely aspirational marketing copy. It sounds good on a slide, but remember, 80% of projects fail just on basic data quality. True, robust AI governance is a deep, continuous, highly structured operational discipline. It requires significant maturity and dedicated resources.
So a startup might talk the talk, but they probably haven't actually walked the walk.
Very likely not. Real governance failures are common. Models get deployed and then fail crucial FDA or SEC audits because the documentation was poor or the validation wasn't rigorous enough, or the compliance framework they built becomes obsolete 6 months later when regulations change. A startup without a dedicated, experienced regulatory affairs team probably just has a governance framework that exists only in their PowerPoint deck.
It's not just about saying you care about ethics. It's about having auditable processes.
Exactly. It's about verifiable structure, reproducibility, transparency, things regulators demand proof of, not just promises.
Okay, so what specific proof should you demand to verify? Their governance claims aren't just marketing fluff.
You need evidence of structure and processes that regulators actually recognize and respect. First, ask for their NIST AI Risk Management Framework compliance documentation, along with tangible evidence of how they implement it.
The NIST framework, that's a recognized standard.
Yes. It shows they understand how to systematically identify, measure, manage, and mitigate AI risks, which is critical for any kind of audit trail. Second, ask for their specific bias testing methodologies and demand proof that these methods have been validated on actual production systems, not just in a lab. How do they continuously monitor for model drift and emerging bias in the live environment?
Show me the ongoing monitoring, not just a one-time check.
Right. And finally, and this is a big one, ask for evidence of their regulatory approval histories. Have they successfully navigated their systems through relevant regulatory hurdles before? For example, has their healthcare AI model actually passed an FDA submission? Has their finance model survived a deep dive audit by FANRA or the SEC? Prior regulatory success in a comparable environment is powerful proof. Lack of it is a major red flag.
Okay, when you put all this together,
Yeah.
the 95% failure rate, the fact that the tech is largely commoditized, the way the big incumbents dominate the actual revenue, it really leads to one pretty stark conclusion, doesn't it?
It really does. Proceeding with an unproven AI vendor, especially in a highly regulated space like finance or healthcare, it's an unjustifiable gamble.
The risk isn't just that the project fails and you waste money.
No, the failure isn't just financial. For the technology leaders, the executives making the decision to adopt, the failure can be existential. Hashtag tag 4.1, the regulatory and litigation stakes.
We really need to hammer this home for listeners. Choosing an unproven vendor one that then crashes and burns because of data issues, integration failures, or compliance gaps isn't seen by regulators or the courts as, like, admirable innovation that didn't quite work out.
No, it's increasingly viewed as negligence. You had the data showing the high failure rates, you knew the risks, and you proceeded anyway without demanding sufficient proof.
And the potential consequences of that negligence are huge. We're talking multi-million-dollar fines for breaches or compliance failures, crippling regulatory sanctions, lawsuits.
And potentially irreparable damage to the company's reputation. Trust is hard to win back once it's lost due to a major compliance failure.
And these aren't theoretical risks anymore, are they? We're seeing these failures play out in court right now.
Absolutely. The systemic failures are translating directly into major lawsuits, and these cases are setting really important legal precedents, especially around vendor accountability. The lawsuits are directly challenging whether the AI tools themselves are fit for purpose and non-discriminatory.
You mentioned bias liability earlier. Can you give that Workday example again?
Yeah, the Mobley v. Workday class action suit, filed around 2024. This was pivotal. The lawsuit didn't just target the companies using Workday's AI tools for screening job candidates.
Right.
It specifically named the vendor, Workday, arguing that Workday was liable as an agent because its tools allegedly discriminated against candidates based on protected characteristics.
Wow. So the vendor who supplies the bias tool can be held legally responsible alongside the employer who uses it.
That's the precedent this case aims to set, and it's a massive shift. It means the vendors themselves are potentially on the hook for violating laws like EEOC regulations if their AI isn't fair. This dramatically changes the risk calculation for every AI service provider. They can't just sell a tool and wash their hands of the outcome anymore.
Okay, that's huge for hiring AI. What about healthcare?
Healthcare is another area seeing major litigation. There are high-profile lawsuits against giants like United Health and Humana involving AI tools they use for things like processing insurance claims or deciding on care levels.
And some of these models had serious issues.
Serious issues is an understatement. In one case involving United Health, the AI model used to review Medicare claims was reported to have a shocking 90% error rate in denying claims that should have been approved.
90% error rate, denying necessary care.
Allegedly, yes. That's the nightmare scenario of failed AI governance. A model scaled improperly, maybe without effective human oversight or proper auditing, leading to potentially thousands of wrongful denials and real patient harm. That inevitably leads to massive lawsuits over negligence, breach of care standards, and potentially regulatory fraud.
And even in government contracts, we're seeing disputes.
Yeah, there was the Percipient.ai v. United States case around 2024. It highlighted litigation over the government allegedly failing to properly evaluate or integrate the commercial AI capabilities the vendor had promised during the procurement process.
So the theme is consistent across sectors. The huge gap between the sales pitch and the operational reality leads to disputes, litigation, and potentially severe legal or regulatory consequences.
Exactly. The AI implementation graveyard is full of projects that died because leaders got seduced by flashy demos and innovation theater. They ignored the red flags, underestimated the brutal complexity of data cleanup and legacy integration, and didn't demand the hard proof. Hashtag 4.2, the four prudent alternatives.
Okay, so given these huge stakes, financial, legal, reputational law, what should technology leaders actually do? If rushing in with an unproven startup is negligent, what are the smarter, more prudent alternatives?
We see four main prudent paths forward for adopting AI in these high-risk environments. It requires a shift towards caution and risk management.
All right, what's option one?
Option 1, build internal capabilities. Develop the AI expertise within your own organization. This is probably the best approach for applications that are truly strategic, the ones that could give you a unique competitive advantage based on your specific business model and data.
So keep the core competency in-house.
Right. It takes longer, yes. The upfront investment is higher, but you control the risk completely, you own the resulting intellectual property, and crucially, you retain all the institutional knowledge learned during development. You avoid vendor lock-in and protect your long-term edge.
Okay, build it yourself for strategic stuff. What's option two?
Option 2, engage established enterprise players. For those really mission-critical, high-stakes deployments, think core financial risk modeling, high-volume medical claims processing. You should probably stick with the giants. IBM, Deloitte, Accenture, the big established players.
The ones with the proven track record.
Exactly. Yes, their sticker price will likely be significantly higher, but their execution risk is demonstrably lower. They have the financial stability to survive bumps, they have those massive benches of specialists we talked about, and they have documented success navigating the specific regulatory mazes you operate in, like GDPR or complex FDA submissions. Plus, frankly, they can afford to absorb the financial hit if something goes wrong, unlike a startup that might just disappear.
Higher cost, lower risk for critical functions. Makes sense. Option 3.
Option 3, demand rigorous pilot programs. If you do engage with a vendor, especially a newer one, you have to structure the pilot fundamentally differently. It's not a sales demo for them. It's a true objective experiment for you, designed to fail fast if necessary.
How do you structure it that way?
You insist on skin-in-the-game pricing. Tie their fees directly to achieving objective, measurable success criteria, performance guarantees with financial consequences, success-based fees. They only get paid fully if it actually works according to agreed metrics.
Make them share the risk.
Make them share the risk. And, as we discussed, absolutely critical, you must evaluate their solution using your actual data and integrating with your actual legacy systems during the pilot. No exceptions. If they can't make it work with your real-world mess in the pilot, they definitely won't make it work in production. If they resist integrating with your real systems for the pilot, walk away.
Okay, rigorous pilots with skin in the game. What's the final option?
Option 4, wait for market validation. This is often the simplest and honestly frequently the most prudent choice, especially for AI applications that aren't immediately mission-critical or differentiating.
Just wait.
Let others make the mistakes. Pretty much. Monitor the emerging vendors, watch the space, but let other organizations, maybe those less risk-averse or in less regulated sectors, serve as the early adopters. Learn from their inevitable 95% failure rate. Keep tabs on vendors, but don't commit yet.
How long should you wait?
Maybe revisit your vendor evaluation 12 to 18 months after your initial contact. By then, the market hype might have died down, many of the weaker players will have disappeared, and you might start to see a few genuine leaders emerge with actual verifiable case studies and longer-term client references. Let the market mature a bit on someone else's dime. Hashtag shag outro. So let's try to wrap this up. The key takeaways from our deep dive today are pretty clear, I think. The AI consulting market, particularly for regulated industries, is still profoundly immature.
Yeah, the failure rates are enormous, they're predictable, they're verifiable if you look.
And most vendors, especially the newer ones, are fundamentally selling commoditized services built on standard technology stacks. They aren't selling unique, proven breakthroughs despite the marketing.
Which means the burden of proof has to shift entirely. It rests completely, unequivocally, on the vendor making these extraordinary claims about security, integration, and governance.
Absolutely. Extreme skepticism isn't being negative or pessimistic. In this environment, it's simply mandatory, prudent risk management, especially when a single compliance failure can lead to millions in penalties and destroy public trust.
So the vendor needs to prove it, not just promise it.
Yeah, they need to provide the auditable proof. The true partner isn't the one with the slickest demo or the fanciest buzzwords. The true partner is the one who can show you they have already successfully navigated the entire implementation challenge, the data, the integration, the compliance, the scaling in a comparable environment.
They need the SOC2 Type 2 reports, the live scalability demos under load, the verifiable multi-year references in regulated industries, all the things we discussed.
Exactly. Evidence, not assertions.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means the next time a vendor hits you with those familiar phrases, seamless integration, custom architecture, robust governance, you're armed. You know exactly how to probe the weaknesses, how to challenge the unit economics of their HITL claims. You know precisely what kind of auditable, verifiable proof you must demand.
And you understand the profound risks involved to your project, your budget, your compliance status, and your organization's reputation before you commit.
Demand proof, not promises. That seems to be the bottom line.
That's the bottom line. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the sometimes harsh reality behind the AI vendor hype.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.